Welcome, everybody, to Trauma Training Tuesday, the trauma of microaggressions. Not exactly microaggressions, what they are, how they show up in the workplace. We definitely recognize that microaggressions are part of larger traumatic experiences around identity. And I'm super, super grateful, Sarah, to introduce Joyce McNickles. Dr. McNickles is one of my closest friends. I'm proud to say her expertise is in addressing racism and the harm done by racism. And that's a context that I met her in like 30 years ago. And originally, I wanted her to do one of the first Trauma Training Tuesdays. And because of all the horrible things that happened to us, I'm getting messages that people are having trouble with the link. They're saying it says invalid link. I'm not sure why. Oh, I got a bunch of messages saying invalid link. So,
Amy, do you want to take care of that, or do you want to send them over to me?
Can you do that, Kels? Can you send that? Susan asked, and people asked on the Facebook page. So, Susan, oh, that's awesome. Did you guys find the link worked okay on Facebook? Okay. Yeah, Susan Buckles is one person who said she couldn't get in, and then I got a message from somebody on our Facebook saying that they couldn't get in. So sorry, it didn't work from the website. Okay. Maybe the Facebook link didn't work. Okay. The link on the email until it was sent from Kelsey via email. That's how we got on. I'm so glad you guys are all here from Family Health. Thank you. Hopefully Kelsey's on it, right? She's sending it to people all over the place. And people are here, so that's always a good sign. Thank you so much for all being here, but I know that lots of people intended to come. So hopefully they're getting what they need and they'll make their way here. Again, Dr. McNickles this is her expertise. She is amazing. She cares deeply about this. She was a past Trauma Training Tuesday presenter, but for a sort of a different topic, and wasn't the main presenter, but really shared herself and her experience. And that's what's so amazing about her. She's very willing to share her knowledge, her experience in service of people understanding more about how trauma impacts people in the world. So hopefully our tech things are working out. Looks like more people are making their way in. I am going to be doing the slides. So that means that all I'm going to be able to see is the slides. But I have Kelsey Hopkins and Deb Falzoy both here from Worcester Addresses Childhood Trauma, and they are able to help out with the chat. And Joyce is going to be kind of doing all the verbal pieces. Anything else, Joyce, that I should say by way of introduction? I said that you're awesome.
Well, don't get their expectations too high, Amy.
But don't expect much. She is an awesome, incredible presenter, but keep your expectations low.
No.
No, you won't have any trouble meeting their expectations. I have no doubt. Okay, good. So we're getting Sue's here. Good. And I am going to, Christy Wheeler messaged me that the link wasn't working, but I think it looks like people are getting it now. Let me just change my view. How's that look? Good?
Yeah.
Everybody can see that okay? Awesome. All right, I'm going to turn off my video. And I think I probably need to mute too, right? And then I'm just listening. And Joyce, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Amy. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at my, I don't see anybody, which is weird because I feel like I'm top in a cave. And I do that because I'm looking at two screens at the same time. I'm looking at my PowerPoint and also my notes page. So I'm guessing you're starting at slide 1 with the title, right, Amy? Yeah. Okay. So
Yes.
yeah, so we're just gonna move on to like what our anticipated outcomes are. So we are here today. We can't do microaggressions, really do the whole subject justice in this short amount of time, but here's what we are hoping to accomplish with our anticipated outcomes for today. To understand the relationship between microaggressions, unconscious bias, prejudice, and oppression. We are hoping to understand the effect of microaggressions on target groups. And we are going to be looking at microaggressions across spectrums of marginalized identities. And I'm going to say a little bit more about the whole notion of focusing on one target identity rather than on multiple ones. Okay? So we're going to identify examples of the 3 types of microaggressions. And oftentimes when people hear the term microaggressions, they're not thinking about, oops, okay. They're not thinking about how there are actually, within that broader topic or term, different types of aggressions. So micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations, and how they affect interpersonal dynamics and interaction. And then the last outcome is to explore specific microaggression scenarios and identify effective intervention strategies. Okay, so next slide, Amy.
Did it? Is it there?
Okay,
A
yeah.
word of caution?
Yeah, yes. Hold on a second. I have, yeah, so you're looking at a word of caution, okay. So microaggressions look different for different identities. Hold on 1 second here. I just want to, because I just want to just double check where we are. Okay.
I've got microaggressions look different.
Yep.
That one.
Yeah. Okay. We're good. We're good. So microaggressions, they look different for different identities. And so initially when I did this session, I did it for a group of human resource management professionals, and they wanted me to focus on microaggressions across identity groups. And my first reaction was like, nah, I'm not doing that. Like, we need to focus on one particular identity group. So let's do racial microaggressions. And they're like, no, but people are really wondering about like how it plays out with other identity groups. And so I said, okay, I'll do it with the desire that you will definitely have me come back and focus on specific groups. But I did stress the word of caution that they look different for different identity groups. The individual scenarios that play out for people can look different if it's around race, if it's around gender, around sexual orientation, gender identity expression, and so forth. But essentially, each identity deserves to have its own session exploring scenarios, strategies, and interventions. But having said that, we are trying to get the biggest bang for our buck, given that people don't have a whole lot of time. So we are going to really think about microaggressions in this session across different identities. Okay. And so, Amy, if you can move to the next slide.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
In your day-to-day life.
So I want people to think about, and we're going to move it. Uh-oh, I heard some feedback. Okay. I'm not sure with that. Okay. Amy, are you hearing that feedback?
I heard that feedback. I can't,
I think it's gone now, though.
okay, yeah, I think, either Deb or Kelsey can mute if somebody has.
Okay.
That's the
Thanks.
issue.
Yep. We're gonna talk about what we mean by microaggressions in a minute, but I first want people to do some reflection, all right? So in your day-to-day life, how often do you feel any of these things? And I'm gonna just, if Amy, if you can, let's just advance all of them up at the same time, all of the bullet points there on that slide. If
Got
any
it.
of these things happen to you, in your day-to-day life, right? Because of any of the following, because of your gender, because of your gender identity expression, your race, your sexual orientation, your religion, your ability status, your socioeconomic class or age, or perhaps there's another identity that I don't have listed here that you might want to include in that. But just think about how often do these things happen to you, that people seem uncomfortable around you. You know, you're looking at their body language and expression, and you know that they just seem to tense up when you're in their space rather than if there was someone else in that space. Or perhaps you notice on a day-to-day basis that people treat you with less courtesy and respect than others. And that can be perceived differently depending on who you are. What does it mean, less courtesy and respect? But from your perspective, how often does that happen? You know, when people are treating you with less courtesy and respect, or people treat you in such a way that you know that you're an outsider to them, right? Or you receive poor service than others at restaurants, stores, and so forth. Or people act as if they think you are not smart, right? So in the chat, if you could, and I mean, remember, you're thinking about this in terms of, does it happen? It doesn't have to happen to you because of all of those identities, but it could even be just one, okay? How often does that happen to people? You can maybe say hardly ever, never, sometimes, all the time. And let me see if I can peek over and multitask here and look at the chat myself and see what people are saying. But if somebody could just alert me if there's something. What are we seeing in the chat?
I have people that are saying that this happens to them all the time around race. And then somebody said that there's a restaurant where they get treated. They've noticed that they're not treated the same way. Yeah, a number of people are saying that this definitely resonates because of sort of when they're in public spaces, they feel like they are treated differently.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
People mentioned race, they mentioned age, physical ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then people who are in a lot of identity groups that carry more privilege aren't experiencing this. So absolutely, it's landing that this is about something about your identity.
Okay, great. I mean, not great that it happens, but great that people are aware of that. Okay. All right.
Here comes the clip.
Yeah, next slide, please, Amy. Oh wait, just hold on one second, Amy, before we set that up. I want to set it up. So I'm just going to show this brief video where you're actually going to be observing someone experiencing this microaggression. Okay, so go ahead, Amy.
When I'm on new projects, and if I happen to mention that I have a son, the immediate response is, "What does your husband do?"
When I've corrected somebody in saying, asking what my partner does, and they've said, what does he do? And I've said, oh no, she. They've then said, oh sorry, I didn't realise you were a lesbian. To which I've replied, no, it's okay, I'm bisexual though. And then they said, oh, so you're greedy. And I'm like, I didn't really know what to say. It's like...
I'm doing some voice therapy at the moment, which can take at least 3 to 4 years in order to train my voice. I've been told try and avoid, if I can, any telephone conferences, which obviously is very, very hard in the IT world.
I was talking with a colleague one day about adoption, children, the cost of surrogacy, and somebody was passing by and they went, why would you want to buy, why do you need to buy a baby? You're engaged or married, you're married, aren't you? I would assume that you had a wife. I was like, yeah, I am engaged, but to a man.
Okay.
I think, is that the end of it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, hold on 1 second here. And then I want to show you the next, one more clip.
Crazy. It looks like a mess.
I don't believe it. Your hair always looks awesome. I mean, how do you do it? Do you twist it? Do you do it yourself?
Yeah, I twist it myself.
Oh. I mean, do you mind?
Oh. Yeah, actually, I do mind.
Oh, sorry.
But I mean, if you're really curious about it, there are like tons of YouTube videos out now about natural hair, so maybe check that out.
There's no way we're gonna make it to that date.
No. I have no idea what they were thinking. What are you doing this weekend?
Going to the beach with some buddies.
Dude, sunscreen. You've already got quite the tan. Where's your family from?
Here.
Yeah, but before here, where are they from?
Still here.
But before that?
A few generations from here.
Cool. Sorry.
Okay. I think that was the end of that clip. Oops. So I'm just curious. Sorry about that. Let me just move this ahead here. Amy, you're on the next, we're on the microaggression slide, correct?
I got, what are they? Microaggressions.
Yes, okay. So, but before we just give a general definition of microaggressions, I'm just wondering if there are any folks who have experienced something similar to what they saw in both of those clips, or either observed someone else experiencing something similar to what was in those clips. And folks can either raise their hand and say something, or they can put something in the chat.
I'm seeing people saying, yep, they've experienced that. Definitely, both of those clips were scenarios that I've heard people talk about or witnessed myself. People being asked about, like, where are you from, or about their hair, or about their partner, when people are making assumptions and are irritated that their assumptions are not correct.
Yeah.
Susan saying your English is so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I popped over to the chat real quick and I could see, yeah, I can see them now. I'm trying to do a lot of multitasking here, so but I
Judy
appreciate you
talked
looking
about mixed race, and I know that people here have experienced that as well. When someone in your family does not appear to be the same race as you, all kinds of things get said.
Right. And I know that someone had said something about sometimes people don't know how to, I think they mean ask the question, right? And some questions actually don't need to be asked, but I think that people, have a natural curiosity about things. And when someone is on the receiving end of the questions or the unsolicited comments, regardless of the person's intention or curiosity about the other individual, it can really create a lot of angst and stress for people. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So thanks. Is there anybody else that wanted to add anything there? And again, I feel free to raise your hand and ask a question.
I did notice Susan was owning that she, unknowingly has made comments before, and that's, I think, really, I'm sure you'll talk about that, but absolutely, that's why we're doing this. This is learning. We know that people don't mean harm or don't mean ill will when they do this. But they're recognizing the impact is why we're here, because we
Right.
want people to do a better job.
Right. Thanks. So if you can advance so we can see what the definition is of microaggressions, Amy. So I'm drawing upon a lot of the work of Daryl Wing Su, who is in the field of psychology, and a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is from a particular article that he had written with his colleagues, and I will send this to Amy and she can make that available to you. But it's entitled Dismantling Racial Microaggressions, Micro-Intervention Strategies for Targets, White Allies, and Bystanders. And so he, hold on a second, let's go. So he actually, when he talks about microaggressions, he's really focusing on racial microaggressions. But I find, and I think a lot of people do as well, that how you appropriately intervene when you witness or are the recipient of a microaggression are very similar. So, but anyway, I'll pass that article on to Amy. But anyway, microaggressions, right, according to Sue and his colleagues, is the brief and commonplace, and I know many of you have probably seen this definition before, brief and commonplace daily, that's the key point, is daily, is consistently there as a part of a person's life. The daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether it's intentional or not, but the end result is that they communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults to the target person or group. So one thing that we want to notice about microaggressions is you're just even looking at the word itself, micro, right? And for those of you who might come from the field of social work or you're in other human services areas, we know that micro, we're talking about things that happen like at the micro level between individuals, right? It's small, right? It's on a smaller scale in the social context rather than at the macro level. However, there's nothing really small at all about microaggressions. We call them, I mean, if you can move to the next slide, actually, the one where we're talking about micro or macro. So the thing about microaggressions is that they're happening all the time. Not that they're insignificant, right? So we don't want to conflate the idea of insignificant with the word micro. They're happening all the time, and it's these things that happen to us on a daily basis between us and individuals. Sometimes they're in our face microaggressions, sometimes they're subtle slights and attitudes and behaviors that we experience from others. But the fact is that they are really symptomatic of the larger system of oppression, right? So because we have aggressions at the societal level towards targeted groups, people of color, members of the LGBT community, people with disabilities, older people, poor people, religious minority groups. We have targeted oppressions that systematically marginalize these groups. And as a result, you're going to see behaviors play out at the micro level, right? So what happens between individuals. So just to be clear about it, there's nothing small in terms of the consequences for people when they experience microaggressions. The thing about microaggressions is that oftentimes people think that they're harmless actions, right? When you compare them to some of the more systemic policies that hurt people of various target groups. But these seemingly, I put in quotes, slights occur on a daily basis, which can create long-term harm to individuals emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And the thing about the microaggressions, which from me as a Black woman, from my perspective, that really gets at me, is that you cannot always prove that the person was intentionally, and not that it makes any difference because the consequences are the same, but you can't prove for sure in your mind that that person was really trying to be aggressive and really try to hurt you. It's a weird thing where you think, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure, I don't know what they were really saying. Like, what was that all about? It's just it leaves you with a weird, icky feeling. And the person who is committing the microaggressions oftentimes, see themselves as being harmless. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And again, questions, comments, I'm welcoming the questions and comments as we move forward. So why do they matter, right? Why do microaggressions matter? Well, a 2016 study that appeared in the Journal of Urban Education reported that, and why do they matter particularly in the workplaces, which is what we're trying to really center around today, reported that people who experience microaggressions have negative job satisfaction. Offensive speech and microaggressions can affect their productivity, right? And so those things matter in the workplace, right? So from the, from the HR perspective, right? Or just a management perspective in general, these little so-called slights really do have major consequences on how much an individual can show up at work, fully show up in their role at work. And that in turns can affect how productive they are, right? And again, so we think about how these affect us in the larger society. I think it's just the potential for harm is actually even more so, right? Because it can affect our health, right? Not just at work, but our mental health at work, but our mental health outside of work and our physical health. And Amy, you can just move all those bullet points up at once. I think there's only 2 actually. You got them all? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So it leaves us with feeling of being undervalued, and it may prevent people who are in the targeted groups from applying for jobs, negotiating salaries, striving for promotion. All of those things have an effect on us. So they're not small, at least in terms of the workplace, right? And certainly they're not small in society in general as we try to navigate these spaces. Okay. All right, Amy, I'm gonna, before you start playing that, hold on a second, Amy. So before you start playing that, I wanted to show this little clip, again, just speaking from my experience as a Black woman. When I found this and I said, I can really, oh my God, I can really relate to this. And, just the constant barrage of the microaggressions and how you have to spend so much energy. And I know that this session, we're doing this on a Trauma Training Tuesday. And so I haven't used the word trauma a lot yet, but I think from what you can see so far, this is all about trauma, right? When you're experiencing these day-to-day slights and just the impact that it has on you at work and outside of work. Okay, Amy, go ahead, please.
The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman.
They were just like, let's put the big black girl out there.
If I were a different race and a different gender, would you be treating me the same way?
Immediately, they want to disrespect you.
Something that I'm interrogating in myself, but I'm like highly sensitive to, especially in like a work environment, about how I present. And I only present certain things about myself with certain people.
People want me to have this singular experience around this part of who I am, as opposed to seeing me as a full human being.
There were moments where people were not taking me seriously or thinking that I was subpar solely because of my race and my gender.
Where the assumption is always going to lead in that I know less than the rest of you because I'm not like a skinny white boy.
Coming into the workforce, I think I posed a threat as far as my knowledge. I was too young to be too smart, too precocious, just too much of everything too soon.
A lot of times that looks like tokenism. So it's, we're going to tell you that we want your brilliance, but we really just want the people to know that we have a black trans woman working here. So in that way, it's kind of like being uplifted, but also kind of put in a box where you're not allowed to be anything but that thing.
Being Black woman and young in the work environment is very, very challenging because immediately they want to disrespect you. For some weird reason, older white people want to just automatically just be like, whatever you're saying is just stupidity and I want to disrespect you however I can.
One of the last jobs I had, I found that there was this coworker who, whenever I would say something, would immediately counter what I was saying and question what I was saying in a way that didn't make sense, because I'd actually been there a little longer than her, and I was like, I don't understand. So I talked to another Black coworker because I was like, I don't know if I'm being sensitive about this. Maybe I'm reading into things. Can you I don't know, but this seems very weird. And then he ended up having a situation with her where there were other coworkers, most of them were white. She was then asking all of them what universities they went to, and they all answered, and she skipped him. And then he asked her, why didn't you ask me? And she said, oh, I just assumed you didn't go to college.
So when I first started working in New York, I knew nobody, and to make ends meet, I would be a background actor. And I would work, and I would get on these huge sets like SVU, and I would notice that the only kind of jobs I would get as a background actor would be Brooklyn type, homeless, hip hop club goer, and that my white counterparts would get everything else, including those things.
I also have to wear this veil that makes you think that I can be my whole self at work because you can be your whole self at work, and that's not my reality.
I really struggle with code switching. I struggle with it in every single arena.
So code switching is essentially when you know that you cannot be fully oneself when you're talking. So there are times when I'm talking to white people, I have to amend my speech and change that because I'm like, if I start talking a particular way, you're not gonna get it.
I've used code switching in many contexts, mostly at work.
I turn it on. I have to be my best unauthentic self in order for me to relate to my white peers. And I have to make sure that I can talk about subjects that relate to your lifestyle that have absolutely nothing to do with mine.
I can switch from a Nigerian accent to being here, living in New York for 15 years and be dead ass OD and it's fine. And then go into my more proper sounding voice, whatever that is.
Hi, this is Ryan Ashley. It's so nice to meet you. I call myself multilingual because I can go back and forth between different languages. Southern Black, Northern Black, code switching for the whiteness.
I don't foresee me code switching for a white person. If anything, I would probably act blacker with a white person just to see. But code switching, no. I think it's been an issue for me actually, how much I don't code switch, you know.
The way I talk to my boss is not how I talk to my friend. It's not how I talk to my niece or anything like that. And I think that has to do with my own internalized like anti-blackness and maybe some like feelings that I need to kind of interrogate around like the class, the economic class I grew up in.
Figured out what works for different people, how to speak to different people, what to say to make it easy on the ears and the heart so I can get around this.
It comes with the territory, and it's such a survival mechanism that I can't even tell you how many times I do it. I do it every day. It's so second nature to me that I cannot tell you specifically. I'm like, I probably do it 20 to 50 times a day, depending on who I'm talking to.
To me, like, you can't talk about code switching without talking about survival, because some people don't have the benefit of just being themselves because they will literally lose their job or they will lose economic opportunities. And it shouldn't be on them to code switch, but it is a necessary component for survival, I think.
Knowing that, okay, I have to like amend myself based on the environment I'm in, because if I don't, it could actually be potentially, it's either I can I can lose bread over it, or I can lose my own personal safety over it.
Those are the weapons that people like to throw at you.
If I don't understand the rules of the game, it's unsafe for me. And it's unsafe for so many other people. And it's humiliating and it's frustrating because I shouldn't have to prove my humanity to someone else.
Wow, okay.
My younger self.
You want me to stop or keep
No,
going?
no, I'm sorry. I always react to when I see that, when she, that just.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah.
I'd be like, fuck it.
You have the culture, the gender, and the style and the flair of what companies pay millions of dollars to buy and like extract.
Don't take other people's shit personally. It's their stuff. You have to worry about what and how you feel about you. You have to be concerned with what your thoughts and your feelings are about yourself.
That they can just exist, and that can look any number of ways that they want, and that's okay. And that if they just take a breath, they'll have the patience and the confidence and the bravery to do what just sits right in their spirit.
Your Black is beautiful. You wouldn't understand how amazing you are. I wish I would have known that. There was a lot of days I didn't feel like that.
Stop taking responsibility for other people's stuff. Stop taking ownership of other people's things, especially when you are an other.
It may seem very dark today, but you might be a person that people are inspired by one day, and you might be a person that helps pull someone right out of the depths of the shadows that you're living in now. So, you know, stick to it, sugar, and you're gonna be cute, so, you know, there's that.
I'm gonna make everything all right. Don't look to anybody but me, because I know what you need and I know what you want, and I got you. That's what I would say to my younger self.
Okay, thanks.
The most disrespected person.
So, you know, I thought I had myself on mute because every time when I see that, every time I watch that video, I always am struck by, you know, the evidence of how microaggressions will leave us with trauma, right? So as these women were telling their stories, you can see and hear the effect of how microaggressions has traumatized them. So I just wanted to ask folks if they had any thoughts or reactions to that, could they connect it to some experiences that they had? And, you know, we're focusing on the workplace, but if there's something that has happened, you know, outside of work around, you know, in terms of like just having to code switch, pretend you aren't who you really are. Some of the themes that they were talking about in that clip, and then we're gonna go get a little bit deeper. Okay. Anyone want to share?
Anybody can jump right in if you'd like to talk about how that struck you or if it resonated.
Or they
I
can put it in
definitely
the
thought that
chat.
was good stuff.
Yeah.
The one woman who was getting really teary like that, it was so clear how hurt she was, and just kind of even thinking about the level of exhausting that must be when somebody was saying they switched like 30 to 50 times
in a day.
And just thinking about the fact that you have to be so in tune with what your audience is looking for, how they're seeing you, and that you really aren't getting to be your full self, as people have said.
Yeah.
So Amy, I'll jump in. This is Christy. So growing up, I really didn't understand a lot of the abuse that came from the microaggressions and jobs, and etc., from my lifestyle and my lifestyle of trauma. And even now that I've finally seeked education and I've grown, I still can't code switch. I'm getting a little better at it, but ethnicity, lifestyle, trauma style, I still stay the way that I'm at. And one thing that I just still find interesting, I'm 60 and I'm volunteering for DCF as a community volunteer to help reunite families. And even social workers don't like the way I ask a question or the way I'm still trying to help give back to the community or children in the foster care system, because I was one of them. And they still say, oh, again, they don't like that. I was very blessed. I've got a good caseworker who says that you don't own that. That's their problem. But again, even still to this day, even when you try to do the right thing, no matter what, there's microaggressions if you don't get along to get around. And if you don't fit in and you're a triangle and you stand out, you're going to constantly face microaggressions.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah. Anybody else?
You can probably see, Joyce, two people put in the chat that this is really real for them, and they get things like slow down when you're talking or stay in. Really, it just shows how much we want to put people in the boxes, right? Like we want them to be what we expect, and if they act different, we don't know, we're taken aback. I have no trouble imagining Christy trying to just do her best and show up for people and getting, witnessing people's attitudes about who she is and what she's bringing, and yuck.
And I'm looking at what Karina said too about I always had to switch back and forth, but not anymore. I act my authentic self. Yeah. And it takes a while to get to that place, I think, you know, where you can, you know, feel comfortable being in your own skin at work, right? It's not something that happens right away. And, you know, one of the women talked about how, you know, she has to think about how she's going to respond because this could affect her livelihood, right? And so there is just a lot of mental calculus that goes on when we are trying to figure out whether we should or shouldn't, you know, be our real selves. Okay. All right, so Amy, I'm going to have you move to the slide on the iceberg.
Got it.
Okay. And okay. So and don't advance into the stuff under the water yet. Okay. So, you know, the thing about microaggressions, I remember when I was first exposed to the concept, and I thought, well, you know what? This is it trivializes like what I experience, right? As a woman of color. And I think it trivializes what other targeted group members are experiencing, right? Whether, you know, because of their sexual identity, their their religion and so forth. And so, but I realized that that was white supremacy framing of it, right? White supremacy, way that we, in the public space, how we frame the terms, not we, white supremacy frames the term in a way that is palatable to people, and how it can obscure what is really going on under the surface, right? And that's one of my pet, that's why the implicit bias word is one of my pet peeves. Like, I'm like, and because language matters, right? And so, but when we think about like the origin of it, like how it was, so microaggressions, when it came out like from the psychology literature, it really wasn't about like minimizing what people are experiencing, but it has gotten to the point where I think for some people, they think when you say I'm experiencing microaggressions, you're just being super sensitive, right? So let's sort of uncover what's really underneath the iceberg that we see. So we see microaggressions, we see, and the comments, the name calling, or the passive aggressive behaviors that we see directed at people. And again, I know we haven't gotten to specific examples yet, but we will in a minute. But so underneath that though, Amy, if you can advance everything now.
Got it.
Okay. And I think I figured out how I can actually, yes, yeah, okay, cool, okay. So what we're seeing the someone saying, oh, where are you really from, right? We're witnessing that, right? But that's the microaggression, but that iceberg is on top of systems of oppression, right? And systems of oppression are at the lowest depth of the water, right? The lowest not meaning that it's the most benign, but I just have it, there at the lowest depth. So, when someone says something like, oh, where are you really from, right? They're making assumptions about what it means to be, what is a real American, right? And so someone who, might be Asian American, have multiple generations, families, ancestry is rooted in the United States. But for many people, when they think of Americans, they're not thinking of a person who has Asian ancestry. Let's just call it what it is. They're thinking of like a white European. And so the person experiences the microaggression, that statement, where are you really from, right? It's not just a benign comment. It's not something the person is being super sensitive when they hear it. It's really sitting on top of stereotypes about who Americans are, what they look like. It's sitting on top because of the stereotypes. It's feeding into a person's bias about individuals, right? What they're capable of, what they're not capable of, or which individuals have more capacity for a particular knowledge area or not. So and it affects the way that they interact with someone. They're prejudging them, right? So it's a prejudice. So, but even with all of that in mind, that's still on top of systems of oppression, right? So where are you really from? Yes, it's based on stereotypes and bias, prejudice, but it's really rooted in the historical context of white supremacy and racism, right? In this country, historically, people, even though we say this is for everyone, right? It's not for everyone, it's for white people, okay? That's what this country is built on, for white people's comfort, and white people have been advantaged, through white supremacy and the formalization of white supremacy in our institutions. White people have been advantaged. Same thing with gender. In our country, men are at an advantage. They're privileged. Everything's been institutionalized in their favor. And we can do the same with, ableism, able-bodied people. Everything's set up for them, right? And so when you have systems of oppression in place, it becomes almost second nature to people to see in their mind a particular identity group as the one that we see as more normal, right? Normal, right? And the other identity groups are not they're to the margins. And so all of those things all of those beliefs that institutionalized in our institutions, throughout, whether you're talking about the legal system, education, healthcare, whatever, they manifest themselves on a day-to-day basis through individuals in the form of microaggressions. So it's not just what we see on the top, right? Those day-to-day slights that we've been talking about, they're really coming from something deeper, right? So it's not just about us being super sensitive, it's about like just reacting to that the historical baggage of being oppressed. And the historical baggage of those who are in the dominant group, internalizing those messages and acting them out through interactions with individuals from the targeted group. I'm just gonna pop over here for a minute and see if there's, just gonna look and see for myself if there's something I wanted to look at in the chat. Oh, there's a lot there. Okay, all right. Okay, so Amy, if you could,
I'm on implicit bias now, yeah.
Yeah. To the implicit bias slide. Oops. So I wanted to take a minute and just say something about, like, again, it's one of those words that we hear a lot of. And now, I think where we see why I wanted to just take a moment and say more about implicit bias in the context of microaggressions is because I think this is, what we see the evidence of this in the comments that people are making, right? Is, like, you think about that iceberg that I just showed you, the implicit bias was underneath, that initial layer of the iceberg. And I think because, well, let me just, if you can advance it, let's just put them all up there, okay, at once. Okay, thanks. So just as we think about, when we meet individuals from a targeted group, we're not a member of that targeted group, we make the comments, we display the behavior that shows that their particular identity group is inferior to ours. We marginalize them, right? At the same time, we can have a bias and we act in a positive way towards members of our own group. And I think oftentimes people don't realize that, right? That, when we think about implicit bias is always having that negative bias towards members of a targeted group. But think about what that does for how we relate to members of the dominant group. It gives them that implicit bias in favor of them, their norms, their culture, their perspectives, their lived experiences. That gives them an advantage because we're already coming in seeing them much more positive, seeing their experiences being more valid. And so, but the thing about the implicit bias, when we have this negative bias towards members of targeted groups, and this is why people can say these things and they don't have a clue. They can say things and think that they're being really kind when they can say, or they're giving a compliment. They can say things like, oh, can I touch your hair? Oh, you had braids yesterday and today you have locks. Oh, that's interesting. Black people have such interesting hair. Or when you think about how people might be when they're around someone who's transgender, right? They'll saying things like, oh, I wouldn't even known you were trans, right? Like, really? I wouldn't have even known. So they don't even have an awareness of their biases, right? Of what they think of when they think of a person of color. What does a woman look like? What does when they think about what a trans person is supposed to be like, what a gay person is supposed to be like, it's totally out of their awareness, right? And so this is why it really affects our actions in interactions with other individuals, because we don't even have an awareness of our biases. All right. And because they're out of our awareness, they're not really accessible through our own introspection, right? And so again, that's why I'm a big proponent of education, right? And not education in a formal training like this, but education through the lived experiences of coming in contact with people from different groups and experiences, because that is how you begin to learn more about your own stuff, right? We have to be in situations where we're pushed and we're challenged by others, right? Because if we don't really have a clue that what we're thinking is really rooted in a bias, it's really kind of like an uphill battle. But when we interact with someone who might be from a different group, oftentimes we say something that makes no kind of sense, right? And then we get the pushback. And then we're like, oh, and if the person cares enough to do some education with you and tell you a little bit more around what you said, why it was such a problem, then you see that as golden, because now you get an opportunity to really see yourself for how you really are through somebody, how other people are seeing you and how other people reacting to your comments. Anyway, so and then the last thing, leads to feelings and attitudes about other people based on the characteristics. I think we said that already. And we develop these biases over a lifetime, right? Just through our exposure, right? From the people around us, through media, through our education, our formal education. We get these messages sometimes directly and indirectly. So when we are making these comments that are microaggressive in nature, right? We don't always realize that they're coming from a place of bias. And because we don't often realize that, many times when people are called on their microaggressions, their first default reaction is, but I didn't mean anything by that, right? And we're going to say more about intentions later, because that's where people tend to get stuck when they're challenged about their microaggressions. They focus on what their intention was rather than on the consequences of what they did or said. So before we go to this next brief video, just to flip the tables a little bit, I want people to see like what microaggressions might look like if white people experience them, and I was looking for video clips that kind of did this sort of flip the script for the other groups, right? So I wanted to find one, and if people know of some, please send them to me, of, for example, what would happen if men experience microaggressions based on gender, right? What would happen if heterosexual people experience microaggressions based on them being heterosexual, and down the path, right? But this one here is an example of racial microaggressions. So what would happen if white people experience racial microaggressions? So Amy, you can play that.
But you're white. People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
Like, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from?
Why don't you have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying.
You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play the banjo?
Act entitled in the supermarket.
I love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp.
Ew, why does it feel like that?
Oh my God, so it just does that?
No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney.
Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow.
My friend Chad. Maybe you know him, because he's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
No, is it Emma Thompson?
It's C-H-A-D, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer.
How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office?
Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this?
I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun.
What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried meth. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white, though.
You're not really white.
I'm whiter than you are.
So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
No, I
is
went
that
to
white
an
people are...
historically white college, so
okay,
I know about
but I
white culture.
backpacked
Okay, it
in
was a-
Europe.
So can you say how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to, like, take a really popular rap song and, like, make it a ukulele song? That's so cool. I think it's so cool how you guys do that.
Okay. I just think that's so funny. Okay.
That was hilarious. That was great.
Yeah. Any thoughts or reactions from anybody?
I just love all the stuff that she's done on microaggressions. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love it too. Thanks.
So much of the ethnicity stuff I think rings true. Like, you don't speak Swedish, or you don't
Yeah.
like people's expectations that people of color are really grounded in their ethnic origins in a way that white people are not expected to be or asked to be, or and those clips really do show the assumptions, right?
Right. Yeah, they do. And I showed that to a group of people once, and they got so angry about it. You know, a lot of white people got angry about it. And it's like, well,
If they get angry just watching what it might be like if the situation was reversed,
yeah,
maybe that could be a source of empathy.
yeah.
But
Well, you
it's
know, it
like
kind of
too
reminds
serious.
me, like Amy, also like how I heard that there were a lot of men who were upset about the Barbie movie because, like, you know, the script was flipped with the Barbie movie, right? And so it was poking fun at the patriarchy, and there were some men who were really mad about seeing what essentially is reality for women every day, right? And so, but anyway, these people got really upset when I was showing it to them. But I'm just looking over here, see if there's any.
Yeah, Joyce, there's a question in the chat
Mhm.
that says, is it okay to ask someone where they're from because you like their accent? And Levi did a great job, you know, kind of putting their response there. But it's kind of getting buried in the chat, so I wanted to bring that to your
Oh,
attention.
okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you know, okay, I'm going to give you an example of like, and people might feel differently about this. They can chime in. So many of you know, like I was married to an Italian American man for almost 30 years. My husband died 3 years ago from COVID. And, you know, and Carlo was, you know, he was a pretty cool white guy. You know, I mean, I wouldn't have been married to him if he wasn't cool, right? And so, but, you know, he, like everybody who was raised in a white supremacist culture, you know, and, you know, he's male and he's white, he's going to operate from places of his male privilege and his white privilege and, you know, a sense of entitlement. And so, because he had traveled a lot, right? He had been in 67 countries when I first met him. And so he had a natural curiosity about people, you know, where they're from, the world in general. And so he thought that it was perfectly fine, you know, because in his mind, he's like, you know, I've traveled. I want to find out where people are from. And he one of his part-time jobs was working in Newport at an art gallery. And Newport, you know, can be there's a lot of international visitors. So he would, you know, ask people a lot where they were from. And sometimes people didn't mind. They actually thought it was interesting that somebody was curious about who they were. He would often ask because he wanted to know if he had, in fact, been in the country where they are from. And oftentimes he had been. And so he would have a conversation with them and there was a connection or whatever. But I would tell him that, Carlo, that you cannot always ask people where they're from. Sometimes it's okay for that individual, and other times it isn't, because people could be coming from experiences where they don't want anybody to know their country of origin because it's just not safe for them to let people know that. Case in point, I know this from my own experience, having a Palestinian brother-in-law, for over 20 years, is that he was very cautious about whether people knew he was Palestinian or not. He grew up in Jordan, but he was originally his people originally from Gaza. And so he would say things like, I'm Jordanian, but hesitantly, right? If somebody said, where are you from? He wanted to say I'm Palestinian, but he didn't know how people would respond to that, right? And so I told Carlo that it's not always easy for someone to say who they really are, right? Because of fear, different fears. And also, there's some people just get sick of being exoticized, right? So they may have an accent that situates them outside of the US, right? Although people do realize we do have accents as Americans, right? Depending on the region of the country that we're from. I just got back from Louisville visiting my uncle. I just spent a week not understanding anything anybody was saying for a whole week, right? I'm just like, and they're speaking English, but like not English that I'm familiar with, right? And so I do think that it's, oftentimes people want a prescription that can be used in every situation, right? So they want to be able to say, is it okay for me to ask somebody where they're from? I can't tell you that, there's some things where it's not okay to ever ask anybody anything, but I think I can't tell you that in every context, it's okay or not okay for you to ask someone, where are they from, because you're hearing an accent that's different than what you're used to hearing. I think, and I may be wrong on this, but I'm just, I think that there's context for things, right? Where is this exchange happening, right? How are you asking it? What's the tone that you're asking it in? All of those things. But I'd like to hear what other people think about this, because, I don't have all the answers, right? And it's easy for me to say that I can't do a prescription on this because I don't speak with an accent, right? So I do. I speak with a New England accent, but I don't speak with an accent that places me outside of the United States. So, but I'd like to hear, what other people think about it. So my response basically is, I think you have to think about context, right?
Okay, so I'd like to jump in because that was my question. And I
Okay.
want to first say sorry for your loss for your husband, Carlos. But I don't ask, where are you from? I say, I love that accent. Where is it from? What, like sometimes I might say Australian, they'll be like Sweden. And I'm genuinely, because I just like, even with me serving in the military, people would say, because I'm from New England, say quarter, I would say automobile. Say quarter, I'd say 25 cents, or say car, I'd say automobile. So again, I know that people they get a unique distinguish of how each and every one of us speak from different, even within the United States. But I won't say, where are you from, meaning what country, because again, as far as I'm concerned, everybody's from their parents. That's where they're from, and that should be the end of that. But the uniqueness of the language, because I like language and I like the different tones. That's what I was asking, but I keep hearing you answer back that you're asking, where are you from? I'm more asking, I love that accent. Where does it originate from? How, again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for making that clear. I still think that my answer would be the same though, is that the context. And I see that, so Jenny said it depends. When I'm with my Hispanic Latino community, I'm Puerto Rican, I ask to relate within our community so I can find a connection. But outside my community, I don't ask. And someone said, maybe when in doubt, don't. I'm not sure when you, Susan, when you said.
I think part of it is, sometimes when people ask me that, I feel like it's a prejudgment that they, it's a prejudice that they want to, to filter or, and so if I hear it in a tone that I feel like they're trying to prejudge me, because oftentimes it's like, well, gee, you don't speak with an accent. And, and they expect that I would. And so I think that that's part of it, and sometimes I go into situations, or I've been in situations where, they didn't expect an Asian professor, to sit in the classroom. And I had an older white woman leave the classroom because she thought she was in the wrong classroom.
Yeah.
And then, come to find out she was supposed to be in my class, so I think that's just prejudgments that you're trying to gauge that when you answer.
Yeah.
And so it is contextual.
Yeah.
Irene, you have your hand up if you'd like to jump in and add to that.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Hola, Joyce.
Hey, Irene. Hey, girl.
Yes. So I think it is exactly what you're all saying, that it all is a part of that conversation. Because I remember when I was in city government, and when I would answer the phone, we do that switching what is it called? I can't think in English right now, but code switching. So I would code switch when I would answer the phone, when I was the chief of staff to the mayor. And so everybody assumed that I was not a person of color. When they would come into the office, they would ask for me, and they were so shocked when they would see me. So then here comes the questions, right? And even from people of color, I remember this one man who was from, Hispanic backgrounds from another country that's more European. So he looks at me and he says, well, I really can't place your accent. And so then he starts speaking to me in Spanish. He's like, well, where are you from? And then he starts going into this conversation. And I said, he's like, are you this? You're definitely not this. You're definitely not this. And, the disgust in his voice, right? And then at the end, because I knew what he was trying to do, when he was done, he says, oh, I'm so confused. Where are you from? I said, I came out of my mother's coconut. I came from her womb. And that man turns every color because he was embarrassed, because I let him know right there, like, you're here for a service at the mayor's office. What do you need? But he was trying to base his need on what kind of Latina I was, and was I qualified to support him as a better Latino or a qualified Latino than I was.
Yeah.
So it was definitely context, and I have many of these stories in many different platforms, but that's one that came to
white woman.
Yeah, thanks. So, some, I don't know if I'm saying this. Some
John.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, this is
Hi.
John. Yeah, first of all, thank you, Susan, for referring me to this webinar. I appreciate. I'm from Arkansas. Susan and I and Irene, we are friends. We, like discuss and work together for the issues for women and all those things. Give me a second. Yes, I'll just stop it.
Okay.
Yeah, and close the stove.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Yeah, I have something on the stove, and yeah. So I felt like sharing my perceived fear that is related with my religious belief. I do follow one of the spiritual leader named Oso. And and as a Oso believers, we use like wearing this kind of mala, this something which has like locket, and that has his face.
Uh-oh, did she freeze?
Yeah, I think she just froze.
Oh. Okay.
Referring to the history kind of legal
Okay.
battle, all those things, and he got blamed for a whole lot thing, and he was deported to India. So, and recently, Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country, that I feel like is just a one-sided description of, what was about him and all those things. That made me feel like, reluctant to put my this like garland outside, put my locket outside, reluctant to speak about what I believe, my religious belief, and just say that like, yeah, I'm Buddhist, so feeling that like maybe that's digestible and palatable, right? Rather than speaking. And sometime, like people ask me, just recently my professor asked me like, who is there in that locket? Like I'm like, okay, this is this person. And I just explain, hey, but just a little alert that United States has like at a national and political level, he is defamed, like he's treated like a kind of religious terrorist or something. So yeah, I just, like, I don't know, I am sharing this, my perceived fear, just to have some of your insights on it.
What you said totally made me think of Joyce's slide with the iceberg about like what's underneath the comments and questions. And when people don't know about your practices, they do default to stereotypes. And that the obvious harm of that, right? When people don't really know, they're reliant on stereotypes. And I was thinking as everyone was sharing, sort of, if you're the person trying to formulate the question, thinking about the why you're asking, right? Like someone Jenny in the comments was talking about asking because she wanted to connect with other people and find out if they were from the same country of origin as her. That seems like a good reason. In other situations, are they asking you because they want to make it clear they don't see you as someone who belongs in the space that you're in? Some of the things that I know Irene has experienced are much more coming from a darker place of people having stereotypes and ideas about who you are, and their questions are really to make it clear that they see you as other. So just that part, that's something I think in social work in a lot of fields, we want to know why we're asking. What is it for? Right. Who is it in service to? And if it's not in service of something better, like of a better connection or more information, then probably keep it to yourself, or like we don't need to hear your opinions about people's beliefs and race and geographic location. And
right. So I'm gonna have you have us move on, because I realize we're getting tight on time, and I know we're not gonna finish even half of this. But anyway, Amy, can you move to the slides on micro assaults?
Are you seeing that okay? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So remember I mentioned earlier, thanks, that there's 3 types of microaggressions. I think that this first one is what people tend to think of, right? As when they think, like they think of these things that are easy to see, right? Like using epithets or just visual displays of a person's racism, sexism, or heterosexism, and other forms of oppression, right? So like, or avoiding somebody when you are, that classic example of like when a person is a Black man is on the elevator, and then a white woman comes on, and then the white woman just showing her physical discomfort, right? Clutching her purse or whatever. So those actual in your face kind of aggressive acts, these Della Wing C calls these micro assaults. And so there's just the explicit, they're very conscious, the person's clear that they're doing it to hurt you, right? So there's no doubt in the recipient's mind, what the person's intention was. It's clear that it was to be hurtful, right? And again, rooted on top of that stuff that you saw under the iceberg, right? So the name calling, you know, and it even just you know, one of the one I know for me, one of the visual displays that just I think it puts it out there for a lot of people, their oppressive behaviors is what people choose to have on their bumper stickers, right? And so like I don't know about you guys, sometimes I'm driving around, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, just they want everyone to know how they feel about that particular group, right? So, you know, I've seen bumper stickers that say God made a man and a woman, right? Like that was it. You know what that's all about, right? God made man and a woman, and no room for any kind of identity expression that is not fitting into that binary, right? Or even like the visual displays that people have around, you know, this, well, they say verbally say it too, but they also have signs and bumper stickers and whatever you want to say white lives matter, right? White lives matter or all lives matter. That's a micro assault, right? It's explicit and conscious. It's an attack, right? And although they may not, they know that it is. Actually, I was gonna say may not think it is, but they know that it is, right? So then the next one is micro insults, right? And these are the ones that we want to talk more about, the micro insults and micro invalidations. And when we do some role scenario practice and interventions, I don't know if we're going to get to that, and we're probably going to have to do a part 2 on the intervention piece. But so the micro insults and the micro invalidations, these are the ones that really get that people have to deal with on that day-to-day basis. You know, I'm not on an everyday basis dealing with the in-your-face micro assaults. I'm dealing with the micro insults and the micro invalidations. And I'm guessing that people in other targeted groups, that these are the things that they're dealing with every single day, multiple times a day as well. So the micro insults is, you know, is characterized by, you know, communication that conveys rudeness and insensitivity and demeans a person's identity, right? They're subtle snubs, right? They're frequently unknown to the perpetrator, but convey a hidden insulting message to the target. Now, in the case of the perpetrator, in their mind, it may not be intentional. Sometimes may be intentional, right? But it typically occurs due to some underlying bias or prejudice that's outside of their awareness, as we talked about before. So, you know, for example, when you are, so you're at a meeting, I know women, this has happened to a lot of women where they're at a meeting and, you know, the person who's facilitating the meeting, say if it's a man, paying way more attention to other men who are around the table than they are to the women around the table, focusing their gaze more on the men, responding to the men more than they are to the women, right? And that's when, I mean, it's insulting, especially when a woman has offered she's offered the same observations or feedback that a man might have offered, but hers is overlooked. You know, that's insulting. That's a micro example of a micro insult. Or saying things like, when a white employer tells a prospective candidate of color, I believe the most qualified person should get this job, regardless of race. Like, are they saying that to white people, right? Like, but saying that to a person of color, or asking a person of color, hey, how did you get this job, right? Or things like not attempting to say someone's name because it's unfamiliar to you, it's an unfamiliar pronunciation, and conveying to the person who the other person that the pronunciation of their name or the name itself is odd, right? So when I say it's insulting, what it's doing is it's actually showing an insensitivity to who you are as a person, right? And it's normalizing the dominance group experiences and not yours as a member of that targeted group. And then, Amy, you can move on to micro invalidations. And
Should
so
be up there, right?
Yeah. Microaggressions, yep. So that invalidates or negates or undermines the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality of a person. So how many people of color have had the experience of you're the only other, Latina in the work environment, right? And there's one other one, and then people are constantly calling you that other person's name, right? Just mistaking people of the same ethnic group like that as the same. I can't tell you how many times I've been told I look like Oprah Winfrey, Alfre Woodard, like any well-known Black woman, right? It's like, so like this whole idea that we are, basically we can swap one out for the other, not seeing us as individuals, invalidating our experiences, our reality as an individual, and lumping us all into an entire group. Just giving, another way that we get invalidated is that people will often give credit to someone else. I mentioned this a little earlier because it's an insult, it's a micro insult as well, but giving credit to someone else instead of the person who was from the targeted group. Another example is like when you use the wrong pronouns for a transgender person, right? And you've repeatedly used the wrong pronouns after they've told you what their pronouns are. It's invalidating the person's experiences. And when we talk about how it undermines, it's just like what the women in the video were saying, how it just wears you down, right? It undermines your thoughts, your feelings, your reality. And so in the video, in the little images here, I have this person holding the sign. Why do you have to mention that you're gay? I don't tell people that I'm straight. Who cares? Well, the reality is it's invalidating the experience because as a gay person, it's invalidating because heterosexual people, they don't have to tell people what their sexuality is because people assume that everybody's heterosexual, right? We have that assumption of heterosexuality that pervades every aspect of society. And so it's suggesting that sexual orientation holds the same weight for all individuals, which is not true, right? So, and what I mean, it doesn't hold the same weight, meaning that we know you have a different lived experience because of your sexuality, if you are gay, lesbian, or bisexual in this society. And so it's an example of how we invalidate and negate what people's real experiences are in that particular group. I don't think that Joe was being racist. You're just sensitive. Well, yeah, it's easy for people who are in the dominant group to say that, right? And then again, some of these things, I said all lives matter. That's another example. I think that sometimes whether they all seek to invalidate who we are, right? Sometimes I can't tell if it's actually, it doesn't really even matter if it's an invalidation or an insult, right? It still leaves me feeling the same, right? And it leaves the target feeling the same, whether it's an insult or an invalidation of your experiences. So I have a couple, Amy, if you can move the slide. I have a few here. I'm going to quickly go. We mentioned some of these before, but I'm just wondering if people could, so you can look at the microaggression, right? And I have them kind of broken up around different identity categories. And then I have the message that that statement might be communicating to the recipient, right? So a microaggression, particularly if it's an invalidation or a micro insult, there's always a message or a meta communication underneath the statement. It's suggesting something that's not being said, and what it's suggesting is really based on bias and stereotypes and the historical context of oppression. So if you look at the one on your left, where are you from? Where were you born? You speak good English. What do you think would be what's the hidden message? What are people really saying there? And people can just drop it in the chat. And Amy, I'm not going to go and look at the chat. So if you can read that, or people can raise their hand and if they need to say something, and we'll talk about the intention later. So where are you from? Where were you really born?
you don't belong here. Sarah put in there as what's underneath that. A lot of people are sharing that, like you're the invalidation of you're not American.
Right. Yep. And you are so articulate saying that to a person. Usually that's reserved for Black people. Let's just say it. I'm not even going to say other people of color, but just for Black people. You're so articulate.
The underlying assumption is that Black people are not articulate. And if you
Exactly.
are, you're different from the rest of
Yeah,
them.
yes, right, right. And then when I look at you, I don't see color. There's only one race, the human race.
Wow. You're good enough to be just like me. You're almost white. You're close enough.
Oh, one of my favorites is you're not like those people, but she's talking about all of our people.
Say that again, Irene.
I said another one that I get all the time is you're not like those people.
Right.
You're not like them.
Yeah.
But then I am a those. I am a them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's like the exceptional idea. Like this whole group of people is this way and you're not. So you're not like
them.
Your group.
Because they have
And
an
you're
idea.
not, you're not going to become a troublemaker.
Yeah. They have an idea in their mind.
Irene, I know you're a troublemaker. That's why.
Well, you know, I think we're amongst our peers.
She's putting it right back at you, Susan.
That's right. And I think that it doesn't matter how much education a person of color has. There's still all these things that we have to go with evidence when we go to teach, when we go to do a presentation, when we facilitate. Anything that we do, we always have to bring evidence with us. So they don't think we're making it up. And I find myself always giving a disclaimer about my passion being my passion versus aggression. I find that a lot in a lot of meetings. And I always say to them, hey, if you feel triggered, this is a you thing, not a me. And if you would like to know about my passions and why I'm so passionate about this, I would love to have tea or coffee with you to discuss this further, because they feel threatened when I am having a conversation that I'm passionate about, which is about life and everything that has to do with our lives.
Yeah. And so where were we? So thanks, Irene. So I'm just looking at where you are on this slide, Amy.
We did
okay.
I don't see color, one race,
all right.
race.
Yeah. And then and when a person of color mistaken for a service worker or a low-level employee, right? So like, I think the message is clear. Like, so you're in a restaurant, and or you're in the office, I should say, and you're mistaken for being in a lower level position than what you really are. What is the message? That's pretty clear, but well, people in that particular position, that identity. So if we're talking about race, people of color can possibly occupy a high status position, Right. Yeah. All right. Sexual orientation, who's the man and who's the woman in the relationship? And people don't tell me you have not heard somebody say this stuff, this foolishness.
Oh, yeah.
They do.
I'm going to jump in, though. I also want to bring out something that still has not been brought out. There's a lot of microaggression that has to do with social class,
right,
as well as in education. I've seen people that have had good state jobs and retired, and then they'll go work at TJ Maxx, and TJ Maxx don't like how they carry themselves, and they'll put them in the back room because they don't think that they're good enough to be in the front room. So again, there's a lot of microaggressions too that go deeper than just of color, gender, sexuality, origins, etc.
Right. And I think we mentioned that at the beginning, but it's like, yeah, we want all this stuff, think about these and how we respond to them, the intent behind them, why we have them is transferable across identity groups. right? I would have never known you're transgender. You're totally passable as a woman. Well, let me go back up to I didn't do the meta communication about the men, when, and who's the woman in the relationship. What people thoughts about that? Like, what is the message there?
They're norming it to their idea of a binary gender relationship, and
Right.
it's a you're not. Let me make you more like me so I can understand who you are.
For the relationship to be legitimate, it has to be a male and a female. Yeah, that's the message. I would have never known you were transgender. I'm going to just go through these quickly because we're running out of time. Basically, the message is you're not a woman, right? You know, because they have in their mind of what a woman is, and they say, well, you're totally passable as a woman. So you're not the way that I think of a transgender woman, you know. So I'll pray for you, but I don't condone your choices. When you talk about sexual orientation, you know, obviously, you know, people seeing it as like something sinful, right? And then we're going to move on to this next one. I'm actually, let me go back. I'm not going to move on. I'm going to skip through here. Let's stay on that slide, Amy. And possible intentions, quickly, just looking at all of those, what do you think people really were trying to say or convey to the person when they made these comments? I mean, we can't get inside someone's head, but like, I do know when I've heard these comments and I've asked people to clarify, when they explain things, like they thought that I was perceiving it one way. In reality, it's like, that's not how I perceived it, but they had an intention to tell me something, to communicate something, but I heard the message behind the message, but what was their intention? Any of those you can think of what people's intention might have been in saying that? Oftentimes people do try to build a connection, and they sometimes they say stupid things trying to build a connection, but any thoughts about what intentions might have been behind some of those?
Sometimes I think they are intending to say like, you're as good as me, or like, I see you as a peer, even though the comment says something different.
That's something different. Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes people are trying to build connections, right? Like, you know, in their own weird way sometimes, right? They figure, oh, okay, you know, I noticed that you speak good English. They in their mind, they're thinking that they're giving you a compliment, and that's the way to build connection, right? But it's not really a compliment because, as we talked about earlier, you know, we can speak English well, and still be, you know, someone who's foreign born, right? And people shouldn't be surprised when we're able to speak English well. People like that, you are so articulate. I think people intend to give a compliment, you know, but it's rooted in a stereotype of what an articulate speaker is, and in their mind, it's not a person of color, right? And I have people think about intentions, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time thinking about intentions, because I think that's one of the ways that people, when they're confronted on their microaggressions, defaulting to what their intentions were, is a way to not deal with what they just said and to acknowledge the harm that they did in making those statements to the other person. And I'm moving through fast here because I don't want to run out of time. Amy, can you go to that next slide for people who still don't think?
Yeah, is this right where it says the microaggression, a white woman to a woman of color?
No, the next slide. We're not gonna skip over that.
Okay. For people who still don't think. Good one.
Yeah.
Play the video. Here we go.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem.
Oh, you're so well spoken.
Just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while...
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
Sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Touch your hair.
multiple times a day,
So pretty. Can
Can I touch
your
it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
Thanks, Amy. So that I love the metaphor of the mosquito bites, right? Because think about a mosquito bite, right? You're not gonna pass out from a mosquito bite, right? And you get them all the time, right? But if you're getting several bites in a day, like on a hike in the woods, you can see how that can just psychologically and emotionally weigh you down, right? Regardless of a person's intention, right, of what when they made the microaggressive statement. So the next slide, which this is moving into like some of the trauma aspects of it. Experiencing microaggression may lead to the following intrusive cognitions. And when cognitions are intrusive, these are just coming in your mind like that all day long, right? When you are experiencing these, questions that often come up is, wait, did I interpret that correctly? Because sometimes you hear it and it almost sounds like the person is being friendly, nice, like, trying to connect with you. And you're like, well, am I really, is that a compliment? So you're asking yourself these questions constantly. Did I interpret it correctly? And the next slide, Amy, you can just put them all up at the once, so because we're running out of time here. What did he mean by that, right? And so you're using all of this energy to think about what a person said or did, and most of the time your life experience has told you that what you thought they meant is really what they really meant. But you still often will just go through this mental gymnastics because remember, they're like little mosquito bites, right? When something like a snake bites you, it's a snake bite, right? But sometimes you get a little mosquito bite and you're like, oh, you're not sure. Sometimes you're not quite sure, but if you sit back and you think about it, your lived experience up to this point in life will tell you that it's probably what you thought it was. Then you have to do the piece about, should I say something? And you can see how this is exhausting. This is where the trauma comes in. Well, saying something might make it worse, but then if I say something, they think I'm probably overreacting. Speaking up is going to help more than it helps. All of these things go through a person's mind when they're experiencing these microaggressions, regardless of what your intent was, right? Next slide, Amy. So the psychological impact of it on you, and we're going to just put all these up at once, okay? It can cause depression, anxiety, difficulty with sleeping, your confidence diminishes. You can feel like you don't have any self-agency, right? You can feel kind of helpless, loss of drive, and then we talked about the intrusive cognitions, where you have all this internal stuff going on, and you're doing that every day at work, navigating through society, through the stores, with friends, with family members, and so it can become very draining. So when I hear people talk about microaggressions as something trivial, obviously they're not really understanding the consequences of this on an individual, right? It's like a daily exposure to trauma, right? And for those individuals who have multiple targeted identities, it becomes even more problematic, right? So a gay person who is Latina, and with a disability, or foreign born with an accent, all of these things multiplied, all these identities multiplied, can make it even worse, right? Sometimes people aren't even sure which aspects of their marginalized identity that the microaggression is being directed at. So I know we don't have a lot of time, so we have so much more to do, but I want to see if we can at least do this for like 5 minutes, Amy. The put people into I don't know if we should even do this through the breakout groups, because it's like 1:45, and obviously we're gonna have to do.
It does take a good chunk of time for
Yeah.
to get breakout.
Okay, so let's not do that. So let's do this in the large group, okay? So I had wanted people to do in a breakout group, and Amy, maybe you can just drop that handout in the chat.
Okay, I can put the slide back.
Yeah, put the slide back. Yeah, and for breakout activity, put the slide back. Well, actually, no, you can leave the slide where it's the breakout activity, because we're just going to be losing it as a guide, Okay. Yeah. So let me just see. I'm going to see where you're at. Yeah, that's fine. So I was hoping that we could spend some time thinking about a microaggression that happened to you, and what you think that person's what message that communicated to you, all right, and what you think their possible intentions were, right? So we're not doing this in groups, so I will just put it out to a large group, and we can have 1 or 2 people.
Anyone willing to talk about something that's happened to them?
And they can just talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to share something. So as a foreign born, I went to the University of Kentucky in 2014 to pursue master's degree. And in one of the class, like my professor was like, she's a white woman. She's a really good professor. And in class, it was me and another friend from India. So 2 of us were foreign students. And what I found, right, I took a couple of credits with her. So I was her regular student, but I found like she has never called me from my name. She has always called me and my friend Arvin as like ma'am, and she called the rest of the other students have always been called by their name, but like me and Arvin were always ma'am. That, kept me in really uncomfortable situation. I did not realize that while I was there, but later on, as I became more aware of this like microaggression, implicit bias, then, I started to feel that, and it was definitely uncomfortable. I think, I don't think she had anything intentional to do against me and Arvin, but I guess, that was just her ignorance and not being aware, and
Do you think that she was because she called you ma'am and the other student ma'am, do you think that she was not saying your name because she was afraid she was going to mispronounce it?
That was what I was told. That was what I was told by many people. But I would say,
what do you think?
My feelings is, she was not putting effort to try to call by name. That's what my take on. Yeah. Exactly. One person has told me that, like you said, oh, maybe she was afraid that she mispronounced her name. I mean, come on,
Right.
we are from different country. We came here, we learned to call people, just I'm throwing some random names, don't take it personally. Like, we need to learn people calling like, Daniel Mercedes, Layla, and all those
Yeah.
things, right? And then like, so it's just a name. And then like, if you are feeling uncomfortable calling, Anita, Sunita, Samjana, Arvind, I mean, I would say that's just you're not decided to put an effort, and aware of making the thing inclusive.
Yeah, and so I think that, and the message to me, like the meta communication is that, again, the invalidation, right? Like, you're not, it's not important to me to take the time to learn your name because it's not a normal name. That's
Yeah.
really what the message is.
That's what I received, and then nowadays, like, I became vocal when people started to call me ma'am, except in a grocery stores or shopping malls. I just tell especially I really don't like when my friends call me by, calling ma'am. I'll tell them like I like to be called by my name, Sanjana. So okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love your example too, because you showed your internal, like, is it because of this? What's going on? And that's so much of the harm of the microaggression is the person who it's directed at is left wondering, like, am I being too sensitive? I know this professor likes me, but she is treating me differently.
Right.
And Susan put in the comment, it must be exhausting. Because like trying to decipher what nonsense is behind this.
It's the mental gymnastics that really is that's the trauma producing part of it. Like, think about all the energy. Like, you have to think about, the person's making a comment or not, just even something like your name, right? Like, there shouldn't be that much angst attached to the name, right? Like your name. But this is the piece about, in that previous slide, you're asking yourself, did I interpret that correctly? Did she say what I think she said? What did he mean by that? All those things are going on. Just in a class, based on just in a class when a person's trying to like address you, right? By the name that your parents gave you.
Yeah. And then like other professors were fine with calling our name, friends were fine with calling our name. I mean, like, our name was not like the one of the longest word in the English dictionary or something. It was not like that. So yeah, that is something. And when those stuffs re-happen, like, it triggers, as you mentioned, it triggers. I remember, and like, initially I like her as a professor, but like, I didn't like it now, and I don't go back to her asking for any sort of referrals or any kind of letter to me. I won't go back, I don't have any animosity with her, but like, I'm not her friend, or like, I cannot trust her either. It's like that.
I hear you. Yeah, that's
honest.
I get it. All right. Is it, we can take one more.
We do only have a few minutes left. If you'd like me to put the slide back up.
Yeah, can you put the slide back up?
Why don't I do that?
Yeah, and then I'm going to quickly show. All right. So if you can go to the next slide, I think we were at if you choose to respond to the microaggression, if you can put all of the bullet points up, So if you choose, because you don't always have to respond, because depending on the context, right? Explain how the slight may be interpreted, by others or by you, right? And that's essentially what it is if you're the target, and we have like a lot more specific intervention strategies that, Amy, we have to do a part 2 was just because I don't know what made me think I could get to it, because I did this session that we're doing. So I was hoping to do this all, and I know that I couldn't because I had to do it in 2 parts with the other group. All right. So explain how the slight may be interpreted by you or by others. Ask a follow-up question. What did you mean by that? And if it happens, at work, particularly, identify individuals you feel comfortable discussing the issue with, because I think oftentimes, what we're left with is that feeling of doubting ourselves, and having someone else to bounce something off of, particularly somebody in your own target group, can make a significant difference. And then if you committed a microaggression, and you can put all the points up, Amy. Yes. If someone points out that you committed the microaggression, you may feel defensive, embarrassed, and ashamed. Be mindful of your emotions. Remind yourself that you did not intend to be harmful, but note in parentheses, if in fact that is true, because sometimes people do intend to be harmful, right? Let's see. Focus on the impact of your words and acknowledge that the target's feelings are valid. It's not about you in this situation. It's about the target person. Specifically identify the impact made by your comments and recognize that it was a negative impact, right? You generally apologize to the victim to acknowledge your mistake and not for the purpose of receiving their forgiveness. You can learn more about microaggressions and be better the next time, right? So I don't think anybody's going to get this right the first time or the second time, but you have to put the time in to just develop more awareness, and also just to be willing to listen to people from the target group and when they confront and challenge. And so what I want to do real quickly, Amy, I know we're out of time, but I just want to, if you can just show like everybody the whole slide deck, like from the next slide on, so put it, how do I want to say it? Like you put it into like where the slide sorter mode, because I want people to see what we want to do the next time.
Is this what you're thinking? So then the pieces about the interventions and social.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing it.
We definitely part two.
Yeah. Okay. So you can see like, okay, but go slowly. Like, can they see that? So like, where did we leave off? We left off at number 27. So we're going to talk about, so you can go to 27 just real quick. Mike, we're going to talk about like, what why we want to have the interventions. They're called micro interventions. And then we want to just go down and just go to maybe, yes, that's good. And people can see, we're going to talk about, go back to 29. We're going to talk about like why, so based on who you are, whether you're the target or you're the bystander, or you want to be an ally, how you disrupt and how you disrupt and when you disrupt will vary based on your role, okay? And we have certain bystanders, as you probably know, are the ones that keep these things in place systemically. Most people observe and do nothing, right? But there's reasons why people don't do anything, right? They don't do anything because they feel overwhelmed or they don't have the knowledge base, and we're going to talk more about that. And you just scroll down a little bit more, and let's see, and all the way down to where we get to the slides about strategic goals, right? So every time there's an intervention, we have different strategic goals. So we should have in mind what our goal is to interrupt that, when we interrupt that microaggression. And depending on what our goal is, that will determine what our strategy is. So if you go to number 35, you can see if our goal is to make the invisible visible, is that we, do certain tactics. Okay. So we can just scroll all the way back. Yeah, and so you can just go back to your video view. So I don't know why I thought that we would be able to do all of this in that length of time. But
you have an interested and engaged audience who is, wanting to talk about the content. So it doesn't just go as fast as you might think, and that's fine.
Yeah, well, I talk a lot too, so that's probably not great. But
I love
yeah,
the idea of having a part 2 on how to intervene. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, because and I should have known better, because like when I did it the first time, well, I've done this multiple times, but every time I've done it with a group, we never get to the intervention, right? The intervention has to be a second group, and maybe in terms of how we learn as adults, maybe that's better that way, right? That we have the content around what it is, what it looks like, and then have space in between to move on to like, time to reflect and so forth, to then we do the interventions. So
that sounds great. I think you do need some time to sort of, certainly just as you went through this, I was aware of times that I might have said something that was a microaggression, and some of the advice you have for just like really sitting with that and thinking about that and doing better. All of it is just so important to help us create the kind of environments we want people to be in, where they can learn and work and thrive and connect. And it really was so super helpful. And I'm sad that we've run out of time.
I am too. I'm sorry that, I just didn't get to everything, but okay. Anyway, so
the recording will be put up for people on our the Worcester Acts website. I'll also share it on Facebook. If you wouldn't mind, our funders would love a little bit of feedback about if you found this helpful. And of course, we hope you did, and we hope you will continue to tell people about the work we're doing and share it out. Dr. McNickles is available for hire at your workplace. This is the kind of work that she's often doing in workplaces. As you can see, it makes a huge difference in people's satisfaction and outcomes. So we're super grateful, Joyce. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Really helpful.
Okay. And but good to see people I haven't seen in a while. And Amy, I will stay on after everybody leaves just to check in.
Just for a quick debrief. Thank you all so much. Yay. Thanks, Heather, Lynn, Susan, Judy.
Heather.
There's Heather.
The whole time?
She came in a little late. Here.
Yeah, I got here around 1:30, but I was out with residents in the community getting them to ride the bus.
Okay, good for you, Heather. Good to see you.
It's nice to see you. I'm so glad I can go back and watch the recording from the beginning too.
Good. Okay.